Welcome back. You're joining us on NewsX. Samudra Pratap Singh, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has declared we have concluded the mother of all deals, creating a free trade zone of 2 billion people with both sides set to benefit. The pact slashes tariffs on 97% of EU exports to India and 99% of Indian goods to the EU over time, boosting sectors like autos, pharma, textiles and wines. It's expected to double EU exports to India by 2032, create jobs and enhance growth amidst global trade tensions. European media has, of course, been reacting to it. Leaders have celebrated it as a historic win for the world's largest democracies, a hedge against US tariffs and a step towards strategic autonomy and supply chain diversification. In sharp contrast, though, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent criticized the deal, accusing Europe of hypocrisy. We've put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil, but the Europeans have signed a trade deal with India. The Russian oil goes into India, the refined products come out, and the Europeans buy the refined products. They are financing the war against themselves, quote unquote, is what Bessent said. Now, Europe is viewing the FTA, though, as a smart move for economic resilience in a protectionist era, with implementation likely starting late 2026 or early 2027 after ratification. Freddie Swain, former Danish ambassador to India, is joining us live from Copenhagen. Freddie Swain, welcome. Thank you for being with us on NewsX. In fact, we're also being joined by Mark Sutherland now, geopolitical commentator from London, Imam Yahya Pallavicini, Chairman, Ulema, European Muslim Leaders Council, is joining us live from Rome in Italy, and Jasmine Zeravi is live with us from Vienna as well, a journalist. Freddie, let me begin with you first. What do you make of this deal and what its implications are going to be? Also, how is it being perceived in Denmark, where you are? Freddie, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Or I think we've lost Freddie Swain's connection there. But Jasmine, let me come to you if you can hear me on this deal. How are you perceiving it in Austria? What is the kind of response there you're picking up, the buzz and the implications of this mother of all deals, as it's been called?
Of course, in Austria, people are very optimistic about this historical agreement. As the president of the European Commission mentioned, this is the mother of all deals. So, of course, for Austrians, it's very important agreement, as they can notice in the near future a drop in healthcare goods, for example, in medicine. And of course, this will help the vulnerable people here in Austria, and people with like low income. They could afford themselves more products, as prices in general are very high here in Austria, especially in Vienna, and only few people could afford them, like for themselves, all the like healthcare goods or medicine, etc. So I think most of Austrians are optimistic about it, and we will see. It's still like new, but in the near like future, we will see it like making change on ground.
Absolutely, and Jasmine, has there of course been a lot of positive buzz about it in the newspapers there as well? What are the kind of articles, columns, and coverage on it that you're picking up in the press there in Austria and the rest of Europe?
Yeah, of course. Like it's in general, it's mostly one spirit in the whole European Union. Of course, there are people who are like against it. In general, yes, could be, but in general, I think it gives hope to Europeans, because in the last couple of years, because of the war in Ukraine, most of prices actually became higher, especially in energy, for example. So I think it's a new hope for Europeans in general to afford more products that they couldn't afford earlier.
Yes. Okay, let me in fact put out now for our viewers some of the European coverage on this deal. Let's quickly put that out full frame for our viewers now, and talk them through what the coverage there has looked like. So here's one headline. You can see EU inks mother of all deals with India trade agreement amidst global turmoil. That's what Euronews has said on this big deal. Meanwhile, BBC has also put out their coverage. They've put out an article there. As you can see, India and EU announce landmark trade deal is what the BBC says, along with a photograph of Prime Minister Modi and Ursula von der Leyen and Anthony Costa. They all have their hands in their air, and they, of course, all have smiles on their faces. Meanwhile, this is another publication which says India and EU conclude free trade agreement that reduces tariffs in many sectors. That's another report that has come in. Meanwhile, Deutsche Welle has this to say. DW says Modi announces free trade agreement with EU at India-EU summit. Meanwhile, the European Commission has this to say: EU and India conclude landmark free trade agreement. There's another big headline there. The Guardian, meanwhile, is also calling it mother of all deals. They put it in inverted commas, obviously quoting what Ursula von der Leyen and other analysts have said. Mother of all deals, EU and India signed free trade agreement, is what the Guardian says. Let me bring you in here now, if you can hear me, Freddie Swain, on this deal. Of course, a lot of European publications reacting to it, reporting on it, being very, very praiseworthy about its significance. How is it being perceived in Denmark, where you are? What is your first reaction to its conclusion after all these years?
Thank you very much indeed. I've been part of it for many years, and I think it's great to see that EU and India have now delivered on a very promising deal. But we also have to realize that the geopolitics have changed. Not that it's delivered this agreement, but it accelerated. And I think my takeaway, except for all the tariffs and so forth, and they will come gradually. So it's not instant relief, if you would like to say it in this context. But it's about a geopolitical signal, and it really sets out India as a geopolitical, geoeconomical player. And it's great to see. And I hope that the mother of all deals will also deliver a healthy baby at some point of time. So luckily, as I heard our friend from Austria, now we can get cheap Indian generic pharmaceuticals in our part of the world where we pay high prices. So that's a good thing. More fish products and so forth, that's great. And the Europeans can sell more cars to the Indians, so that's great. But I think the significance lies in the fact that this agreement was concluded, and now we'll see. It will take some months, perhaps a year, to get it ratified and all that on the European side. But congratulations, it's a dream that came through, and let's see how this dream can really be dispersed as a benefit to all people.
And how are you analyzing the foreign press's coverage on it in Europe?
No, yeah, but the European press and the foreign press, of course, is hailing and praising this deal. It's hard not to do it because it has to be seen in the actual geopolitical context. But leaving that aside, it's a landmark. And remember, and you also said that, it started back in 2007. I mean, we were hardly born at that time, some of us here. And then it was stopped by the EU in 2013 because we couldn't agree to human rights and all these environmental standards. Now it's a different ballgame, and we are back, and EU-India are now connecting also geo-economically, and it will send a signal to all parties around the world that these two giants will work together and secure benefits to all living in Europe as well as in India. That's landmark.
Mark, what is your first, assessment of the deal, the agreement, its ramifications, its impact, the contours in which it's been finalized, Mark Sutherland?
It's a be with you and your esteemed guests. Well, it means that the deindustrialization of Germany, which sadly has been going on, they can sell a few cars, try and save themselves to India. It opens up that market, as you say, because the tariffs then are lower. Then France, they can get all their agricultural goods in regard to what they produce into India. They'll be extremely pleased about that. What it shows, in my humble opinion, is that the French and the Germans, again, we're trying to stay ahead, be ahead and be in charge of the EU. Remember, let's just put all the cards on the table. In regard to the UK, we voted to leave the EU. We voted to actually run our own economy and then negotiate our own trade deals. Unfortunately, virtually every single government from that decision in 2016 over here, from the members of parliament, prime ministers, including our civil servants, have done whatever they can for us to actually stand on our own 2 feet as a nation. So full cards on the table in regard to that one. The concerns will be, as all the imports then come from India, which is great for India, but if it then means that it undermines various businesses in certain countries, for argument's sake, like Poland, other smaller countries, where they see that the businesses within their borders are not being able to compete with the Indian imports, then this is not going to go down very well. But the French, the Germans, and the people in Brussels, they will be extremely pleased about that. Van der Leyen can say, in my humble opinion, whatever she likes. Very interesting when we talk about pharmaceuticals and her negotiating various contracts in the COVID debacle. So lots of things, and I'm not surprised that the BBC, Euronews, and the Guardian will be going, "Isn't this fantastic?" Because they're all pro the European Union, and as one thing that is not liked, as we look back in BBC history of Jack DiManio when he was on Radio 4 in 1973, trying to give the truth to the British people, and then people get pushed out the way and sacked for actually doing that. There's so much to unpack here. Yes, trade is extremely good, and dear Freddie is absolutely right that there is also geopolitical maneuverings that are behind the scene here in regard to Mr. Besant reacting from America in the way that he is doing.
Yes.
So to see the tariffs drop, see the from 110%,
Yes.
120% to 10% in regard to imports from Europe, that will help, as I said, car manufacturers and etc. without sounding too cynical. Udi.
Absolutely. Jasmine, also, what's the kind of message this sends out as well? Jasmine Zarabi, the message of this agreement as well to the Western world, which is trying to push protectionism. Ursula von der Leyen said it's India and the EU showing an alternative way of how to do things to the rest of the world. Obviously, it's pretty clear who her message was for. But what are the optics of this agreement actually being signed at the juncture we are in today, at what we're seeing around us in terms of the tariff weaponization, Jasmine?
Yes, of course. Like during the past years, both India and the European Union were facing pressure from the US side because of the higher tariffs and more protectionist policies. So both sides had to search and find other partners which can reduce the relay on US and the US market, and also could afford cheaper products for both countries. So I think, of course, it pushed the European Union and India to this deal faster because of these higher tariffs from the US.
Yes, indeed. Mark, let me come back across to you now on what's going to be the immediate impact. Do you see in a few months from now, when this is officially ratified and binding in nature, and actually, of course, it is official, it's finalized, it's concluded, but before it actually comes into effect, I think there have to be certain parliamentary rounds that it has to do. It has to be vetted and then ratified by the European Parliament. So when that does happen, what's going to be the immediate impact? Which sectors stand to benefit immediately? And And what's the kind of message then that this would send out as well to others who have been trying to perhaps oppose this?
We're not part of these discussions because we're not in the EU. And even though our present Prime Minister Starmer would be wanting to stall any of this,
interestingly, Mark, to quickly interject, the India-UK free trade agreement also finally did see the light of day, interestingly, last year already.
Yes, it does. But it's about negotiating independently. And of course, we have a Prime Minister that wishes to lead us back into the EU stealth by stealth, which is actually happening before our eyes. And of course, a number of months ago, he was over negotiating with India in regard to universities and getting our universities being able to open up more and more satellite provision within India and other things. It wasn't such a huge deal because personally, I don't think the British government is actually putting their back into it. At the end of the day, as I've said, this is about France and Germany turning around and saying we are still in charge of the European Union and we want our goods to be able to go into India and vice versa. But they're not thinking about the smaller members of the EU that are within the EU that will actually be affected by cheaper goods being imported into the European Union. That fallout is the yet to come, and what will happen is some of those European countries that are within the EU who object to this, I'm sure that they will be promoted and given certain high power jobs just to buy people off, because this is how it works.
Freddie, if we talk about now India-Danish collaboration, are you hoping for that now to pick up after this deal, an agreement? Also, Freddie, as far as Indian goods are concerned, which are the most loved in Denmark, and what perhaps now from Denmark can be further appreciated in India with lower tariffs?
Let me first say to my friend Mark, I don't agree as to the consequences of this agreement, because the Commission has been negotiating based on a mandate from the member states, and this agreement could not really have happened without the support of also those smaller member states that you are alluding to. So I think basically this reflects the common sense in EU as well as in India. We have to work together, we have to trade and so forth. And I am looking forward to cheaper medicine and drugs in Denmark. I mean, come on, we all have a headache once in a while and other more issues, and let's get the generics from India. So that's a great thing. Denmark and India, we have a green strategic partnership where we have really been promoting the green transition and the ambitions of India in that regard. That is about the wind, solar, hybrid energy storage and all that. And we have also been really active with water. And water is also part of the green transition because it's about saving. And think about if each and every Indian could save just one drop of water every day and multiply it by 1.4 billion, then you have a sea of some size. So let's work together. Let's see if we can really inspire each other. And this is about it. So the virtue of this agreement is that we are now moving forward hand in hand. And I don't subscribe to the idea this only came about because of Trump. This came mainly about because it made and it makes common sense to trade, to partner, and that's what we are doing exactly by this trade. The only thing I am unhappy about is the bureaucracy. It would take too long time on the European side to have it ratified. But that's a different discussion.
Yes.
But be happy.
Let's look at the US. Let's look at the US reportage now. A lot of coverage in the United States of America too on this agreement, on this deal. What are the US publications saying? The New York Times has this to say: in the shadow of Trump, India and the European Union expand trade ties. That's what NYT has to say. CNN meanwhile says India and EU finalize mother of all deals with landmark trade pact. The Wall Street Journal's headline, of course, picture sees a smiling triumvirate of Narendra Modi Anthony Costa and Ursula von der Leyen. And the headline reads, EU and India reach free trade deal as world responds to Trump tariffs. The Washington Post, meanwhile, says India and EU clinched the mother of all deals in a historic free trade agreement. US pressure propels India-EU trade deal. NBC has this to say, India and EU finalize landmark trade deal as they hedge against US. And ABC News has this to say, India's Prime Minister says it has reached a free trade deal with the EU. So interestingly, Mark Sutherland, all the US publications, of course, believe that it's happened because of the shadow of Donald Trump and the US tariffs. They all make reference to the US president, the tariffs, Trump's policies as they talk about this trade agreement, saying perhaps it hastened the pace as well.
Of course they would do, because they don't like the President of the United States, so they will write the lines. And to be fair to Freddie, because I know as he's been involved in this, the negotiations have been going on for some time, and that has to be put on the table. That's true. But the other thing is as well, because over the last few months there has been a rattle of the diplomatic cages in regard to NATO, in regard to Ukraine, in regard to the appalling war between Russia and the Ukraine, and after the Russian invasion in February 2022, that there has been a rattling and a frustration, understandably, by the Trump administration. We only have to look over the last 4 years of the Biden years and ask them what contribution did they made to try and stop the war. Frankly, nothing. But the key is this: is at the end of the day, it's about goods arriving and then undermining other markets that people will then not be able to compete with in regard to cheap goods. And labor prices is always the issue when it comes to this economically. In regard to buying pharmaceuticals, the only advice I can give is for people to turn it to more holistically and just rely on their God-given wonderful autoimmune system that they already have, and to wean themselves off pharmaceuticals. But I would say that, wouldn't I? Yudi.
Yes. Imam Yahya Pahlavi, let me draw you in here. I believe you finally joined us now on this agreement, how it's being perceived in Italy, where you are, what's the kind of buzz and the reports that you're getting, Imam, over there.
Yes, well, good afternoon from Rome. Just to tell you, I would speak more culturally, and I think this is a very positive sign in terms of who, I mean, at least from who believes in, still believes in multilateralism, and how trade can be a mean of knowledge and exchange of goods for every partner. So as such, I think the perception is that it is a strategic agreement, and it is a positive agreement between East-West, or India and the European Union, in terms of opening a new cycle of historical and commercial exchange that hopefully can also lead to a more a new cycle of cultural interchange, where the problem for as far as I can see is the polarization or nationalism or conflicting identities abused one against the other. So if we still have, as this agreement seems to prove, a open-minded bilateral or multilateral agreement for the exchange of goods,
yes, even
in terms of trade, I think this is a very positive dimension.
Yes. Imam Yahya, also, of course, this does send out a message then to the US, doesn't it, as well, that is trying to promote this protectionism. It comes, of course, so soon after that flip-flop over tariffs that Donald Trump had done on Europe over the Greenland issue. And it also comes at a time when India is facing additional 25% tariffs.
True, yes. This is, of course, in somehow connected, but unfortunately, I'm not so competent in terms of geopolitical strategies. But of course, I can witness that the narrative of Trump administration has in somehow portrayed and presented a new way of considering forces, national identities, and strategies, which is in somehow, I feel, moving far from what was the multilateralism strategy in terms of exchange benefits and if I may say, a philosophical concentration on common goods. So yes, there might be a consequence in this agreement in trying to manage also the aggressive attitude coming from the United States. But again, then if it is this, I would hope at least that this should not be another polarization, India and the European Union against the United States. I think the way, without being naive, we have to try to work or to inspire humanity, trade, politics, and of course intercultural and interreligious dialogue and cooperation.
Yes.
Is to be open-minded.
Yes.
For a common good.
Let me get back, Jasmine, because of course she's a journalist on the panel. I'd like your perception and perspective on the U.S. reportage. What you make of what the American publications have said, the kind of slant in their reportage and the way they worded their headlines. What does it tell us about the U.S. outlook on this deal?
So we have seen that the U.S. media has been showing a reaction actually against this agreement, of course, because this means that the European Union will rely more on importing products from India rather than the US. So, of course, this is a natural result, in my opinion, for the higher tariffs that were imposed on the EU. But on the other side, we see that the Americans in general and the traders in the US are especially affected by this deal.
All right. Well, I'm out of time. I'm going to have to leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. Let's slip into a very short break.
Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals.